Hello, folks, and welcome to another great webinar series delivered to you by Ekahau. And today's going to be troubleshooting and how to answer the call. And I've got my guests here, of course, our friendly folks here who know how to find some ghosts and all those little things that are outside in the ether realm, so to speak. Don't know where I'm going with that one, but in any event, we're going to kick off just a couple of housekeeping items just before we get started. And so today we're going to have the chat window open as per usual and the Q&A panel. So if you do have a Q&A question, please put it into the Q&A and we'll get to that question. We're going to try to answer those live. If not, we'll get a bulk of those at the end of the webinar. And if you do know the answer to that, be welcome to join in, because that's kind of how we engage our audience. So, and the chat window is for all that extra banter, that contentious chatter that you want to talk about. And with that, yes, the series is recorded and will be available after the webinar posted. But you know what, Tawny? You know what? We've got some great guests today, don't we?
We do.
I mean,
I'm
are you
really
excited?
I'm really
super excited. And I literally had to break open the pop figures for this one. That's something I never do. And I
needed guests, yes, friends.
That's right. Yes. So definitely. So you're seeing a treat here, folks, today. But we've got two guests on here, both of which are both personal friends of both you and I, Tawny. And why don't I hand it off to you to make that intro?
Well, as you guys can see, we've got Nick and Jason joining us. We're really excited. We've got first timer and a returning in Jason here. But Nick, I will let you introduce yourself first. And by the way, yes, we have some amazing graphics. We have an in-house designer. His name is Julian. Absolutely fantastic. Does all of the magic for Ekahau with that kind of stuff. So shout out to Julian. Nick.
All right. So yeah, good morning. Nick Shoemaker. I am a wireless practice lead at Zero Day Technology Solutions. So happy to be here and being first time. Just bear with me. Take it easy. Don't hurt me, Jason. I know how you are.
He'll be gentle.
I'll be gentle. As gentle as I can be. Hi, everybody again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Jason Bashara, Mobility Solutions Architect. I work for Velispan here in the States, and glad to be here again, just like Nick.
Awesome. Well, as you guys can see, we were talking about troubleshooting, but before we jump into the content, we have a poll question for everybody. So how confident are you that you could diagnose and troubleshoot a business Wi-Fi network? 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 80, or more than 80%? And Stu, cue my Jeopardy music.
Okay, let's hope that it's picking up on the mic this time.
It is. There we go.
All right. That's a really interesting question, by the way.
It is.
It's not letting me answer though, Tawny. There's something wrong with it.
Panelists don't get to answer. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. That's just
I'm done. I'm done.
All right. And so look, we've got a good mix in there. Troubleshooting, I think, is something that is challenging in general for folks. And so that's one of the reasons why we are going to talk about it today. Really excited, because the reality is it could be any number of things. Jason, why is troubleshooting challenging?
Number one, the Wi-Fi always gets for things that could be out of the realm that have anything to do with Wi-Fi. We run into things all the time that have nothing to do with Wi-Fi. We also run into a lot of things that have to do with Wi-Fi, things based on configuration and proper AP placements. And then, of course, we run into those things where we run into things that have nothing to do with either, and we run into bugs. So, there's multiple different steps that you can take when going down the troubleshooting path.
Absolutely. Nick, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's the first thing we always see? Everybody points to the ceiling, hey, Wi-Fi sucks, network sucks, nothing works. And it's like, okay, let's start figuring it out. And, using those help desk tickets, if we actually get help desk tickets, which is also part of it, and actually figure out, what is going on? Is it all devices? Is it a single person? And usually we find out it's, the layer 8 issue most of the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that goes into, when you're talking about troubleshooting, a lot of the challenges are because of improper design or configuration issues. And when it comes to troubleshooting, it's, you hear two main complaints, two main symptoms: connectivity issues, dropping, they can't connect, or slow internet, slow web-based applications, or there is no internet. Because the first thing you hear is the internet's broken, right? And so let's talk about what those help desk tickets. So 9 times out of 10, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but you don't know something's wrong until the help desk tickets start rolling in, and people, and that's how you hear about it, is because you're getting an influx of tickets. So Nick, walk us through kind of what those most common complaints are.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the one we always hear, Wi-Fi sucks. Well, and now, I mean, I would say in our business, I would say probably close to 95% of all of the deployments that we're doing are wireless only. No more cables to desks, no more phones on desk, hoteling, all that kind of stuff that everybody's moving to. And so, it's, hey, my Teams meeting is choppy, my Zoom meeting is, audio's bad, we're getting garbled video, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of that. And then, hey, email's not connecting, just, basic connectivity things. So it's kind of all over the place. And then not only that, now I've got, okay, my laptop, well, I left my laptop at my desk, my tablet's not working right. Nothing's working on my tablet. Okay. So now we have, and especially in enterprise, multiple SSIDs that I'm connecting to. So my laptop connects to an internal one that has back-end security and all that. My iPad is connecting maybe to a guest network that, hey, I don't actually support what you're trying to do on it. So that's a lot of what we're seeing too, is, that. And then just straight up, was a validation assessment done after the install? Do you even know what your environment looks like? And so, those are the big ones that we're seeing.
I think my favorite one is when you hear the Wi-Fi is broken.
Yes.
It's like, okay, let's walk that back a bit, right? To try to figure out what's going on. But that's kind of where it starts, right, Jason? Where do you start once those help desk tickets start rolling in? Where do you start in that process to diagnose?
So for me, it's looking at initially the help desk tickets and initially getting somebody out to site, right? And to gather data. Ideally, I don't necessarily want to speak with the help desk or the manager of the facility. I want to go out and I want to gather end user data. I want to see what the users are seeing from their perspective and what they're reporting. That's what's helpful to me to start the process. Once I gather that data, like for instance, a week ago, I had a customer that had an issue with only Android devices connecting, right? And through talking with multiple users, some management folks that created the help desk tickets, we were able to figure out that it was actually the infrastructure causing the issue after gathering some frame captures, of course, with our sidekick. So, walking through that process, identifying the problem, defining the possible cause of the problem, and then, performing your corrective actions.
So Nick, talk to us about some of the questions, because, the users may not always know what the problem is, right? So talk us through how you have that conversation with them, because I think that's something that's really, really important, is you have to have a real conversation. You have to engage that user to understand what they're struggling with. So walk us through what that looks like.
Absolutely. And I mean, kind of where I'm starting with it, or where I like to start is, number one, what device are you using, right? What are you, Windows, Mac, iPad, computer, what are you using? And then just simply, what were you trying to do? It's okay, Wi-Fi is broken. Well, okay, well, is it, and then, what were you trying to do? What app were you trying to use? What were you trying to access? A lot of times I'm trying to access something on the internet, and it may be a proxy server stopping it. It's something completely unrelated to Wi-Fi, but it's just simply, what were you doing when it stopped working? And, a lot of times, with the help desk scenario, it's a battle, because either users don't call, or they call and it's like, oh yeah, well, last Tuesday I was having an issue in this area. Okay. Well, last Tuesday doesn't help. So, it's really catching it real time, but yeah, just basically starting through, what are you trying to do? What were you accessing, things like that. And then where were you when it happened? And then start compiling that and seeing, okay, all of this is happening in the conference room on the second floor. So maybe I need to look at that area. Maybe there's something going on. So, I mean, those are where we like to start, and, you know, the conversations I like to have.
And I think that's the other side of the challenge as well. There are only two major symptoms we talked about: slow internet or connectivity issues. There could be any number of causes that results in that. So let's talk through what they are and how you go to fix them. So Jason, let's start with you. So you've looked at the network, you fired up Pro, you looked at what the plan was, you're looking at your survey data, and you see you have some channel interference. First of all, how do you go about identifying that that's the particular issue? And then what do you do to fix that?
So I'll utilize the tool to identify when we have co-channel interference and excessive amounts based upon the design requirements, right? Based upon whatever clients that we're using and what we need to support. Further that, I will take a look at some configuration, back to what we touched upon earlier. You know, a lot of times after we do these designs for any given customers, you know, a lot of places they skip the validation, and, you know, we really want to drill down on that. Validate, because how many times have you all seen controllers deployed with default RRM settings, default channelization? So what happens is, like in the case of channel interference, we may have APs that are all sitting at power level max, you know, for whatever vendor that you're using. So being able to identify, you know, things like that in your environment, proper physical layout, proper contention domains for your APs is all important in identifying and mitigating the channel interference.
So Nick, let's just kind of go through this list. Talk to us about airtime utilization.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let's go back, you know, it's part of the interference. You know, can I minimize that interference to open up the utilization? You know, the more airtime we have, obviously, the better everything's going to go. So, you know, do we actually turn off radios to free up some of that airtime? You know, everybody likes to go with data rates and such. We can. I play with them a little, but, you know, it's not a massive thing. You know, it depends on what you're on too, right? It always depends. But also, you know, looking at our coverages, you know, so if we have a validation or if we've done a survey, you know, let's look at shrinking cell sizes. Like Jason said, if we're at full signal or full power, you know, let's start cutting power back and, you know, kind of free up some of that airtime and utilization.
So what about capacity? How do we diagnose capacity as the problem?
That's a fun one, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's why I left that open-ended for the two of you.
We had to throw in a, you know,
It's basically it's math, right? It's add your number of users, multiply their number of devices, and divide by your bandwidth required for your application or files. And then that determines that's going to determine the amount of APs that you use for capacity and channel utilization and airtime utilization in those areas.
Someone was asking a question: what is a good percentage of airtime utilization? Like how much is considered good on a network?
20% or less.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say between 20 and 30. I mean, you start getting above that, and you're going to start
40%. Yeah,
definitely. Then you have capacity issues.
Right. So what about security? Because we know that oftentimes part of something that can go wrong is authentication, being able to authenticate the device to the network.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the vendor, obviously, but, you know, looking at debugs on controllers, right? Watching the handshakes happen. You know, are we failing in there? You know, doing packet captures and seeing, you know, am I you know, what's happening during those handshakes? Am I finishing the handshake? Do I just have a bad password for a PSK, or did the user change their credentials for the network and forget about it? And now all of a sudden, oh crap, you know, I got to go figure out how I change, you know, on my computer. Or everybody's favorite, an expired certificate that didn't get pushed out with a GPO, especially with everybody working remotely so much these days. They walk back into the office and it's been 6 months since they've been in the office. Well, guess what? All kinds of stuff has probably expired over that time, you know, going back to a back end system. So, you know, absolutely just, you know, not only authentication, but, association, did something change over that time? Because I know a lot of groups that we work with are actively making changes to their wireless network, upgrading the network, and, oh, well, we forgot to tell the users that's the wrong SSID. That's, all kinds of stuff like that going on now.
Mm-hmm. So Jason, why does the incorrect number of APs and location impact could cause problems? I'm setting you up for this one.
any one number of issues, right? So what we talked about earlier, in the case of APs and infrastructures that use automated TCP and DCA, so RRM and ARM, right? They send out at least Cisco does, sends out NDP packets. If we don't hear two other neighbors, we peg our power levels at the highest available power level at the set threshold within TPC. That's probably 90% of the time I see those TPC values at defaults, right? So at 30 dBm, which means the AP is capable of blasting full transmit power. That's not good for, everybody knows, for a number of reasons. For asymmetrical client issues, from channel overlap, contention issues, roaming, the list goes on. So the number of APs, the incorrect number of APs and the location. Sorry, lost my train of thought. I'm done.
Wow.
Well, that was
Sometimes it just goes blank.
So and I think to piggyback off that, and it's not only the power settings leaving them at default. It's not only the high end, right? It's the low end. When you've got APs broadcasting at 2 dB, that's not a really good experience when I'm trying to do these real time, intense applications like Zoom, like Teams, that I'm having meetings and stuff on. And, the incorrect number of APs, the first thing everybody always thinks about is, I need to add APs. And typically it's the other way around. I need to turn off radios. I need to turn off APs, where it's for years it's been, hey, Wi-Fi sucks, let's add more APs. And then then we turn the power all the way up. So we just add and add and add and add.
Thanks for that, Nick. You actually let me regain my train of thought.
You're welcome. Hey,
so you jarred.
That's what we're here for.
So, talking about that, APs and their location, especially when you go into warehouses and you find APs that are mounted at 30 foot and they have omnidirectional antennas and they all see each other very well. And to Nick's point, they peg their power level all the way down at the lowest level, therefore giving the perceived coverage gaps on the floor, right? To the APs, they're looking at their coverage up at a 30-foot level. Coverage is great. So it's not what the client is seeing down at the floor.
So Stu, data rates. Why do data rates cause problems?
Oh, well. So that's a really good one, because I think that's often overlooked, and a lot of folks, that's one of the first things I look at is when I'm looking at the health of my network is, what are the data rates configured on those APs, or those I shouldn't say the APs, the SSIDs, right? Because great, if you've got these low data rates hanging onto those SSIDs, you're letting the client latch on for dear life, because it knows that, yeah, I can stay on it at 5 megabits or 2, right? I mean, well, why would I want to, right? I'm going to get a really crappy experience. You don't want to have it up a little bit more, higher. And of course you want to have that basic service set, or the management. I'm trying to think my train of thought now. You want to make sure that if you've got the higher data rates, you're getting rid of all the garbage band, right? Also, you want to get rid of the B rate, because pretty much all the devices out there are pretty much no longer using B anyways. And if you are, it might be time for an upgrade. But you want to get rid of the older data rates, because they create the lower data rates. They create a lot longer time frame of those clients trying to associate and talk. And as Jason and Nick were saying, now we're waiting for those devices to catch up, because if they're talking, and I'm super fast at talking, I got to wait. I got to wait for someone to finish their conversation. So it's important to get the data rates right, because that way you're going to help with your cell sizes a little bit better. You're going to make sure that clients are going to roam much more efficiently.
So what's the recommended, because the thought disabling lower data rates, right? To help
Yeah.
with that. But there are some minimum rates that are required for transfer and other things. What is a good recommended rate, basic rate for the network?
It depends.
Yeah,
It
it does.
definitely
It does definitely
depends.
depends. Yeah. It could be
Thank
12
you,
or
Sam
18,
Clements.
right? It could be 18 and 24 on 5 gig, right?
Uh-huh.
So personally, like if you go, I'll use a warehouse in one instance versus a stadium. 5 gigahertz deployments. In a warehouse, I'm probably going to deploy a minimum or a basic rate of 6 or 12 and a maximum of 24 or 12 based upon
Mhm.
whatever minimum I use. I want to use 2, right? So my control and my management traffic go down at my minimum mandatory. My maximum is set for any multicast traffic. So that's my general rule of thumb, is to use 2, if not even 3. In a warehouse, I might use 6, 12, and
Mhm.
20. So
And I think that's one of the challenges specifically surrounding data rates, is just because I go back to my ECSE training and I think of design for the least capable, most important device on my network, right? Are the data rates for that particular device? And I think understanding that is something that is really critical. And so when we talk about, when folks ask what data rate should I disable, where do I draw the line? It absolutely depends on your environment, the client device, what your applications are, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's one of the reasons why data rates does become so challenging, is because of all of those things encompassing that particular line item.
how much rate shifting you want to incur, all of that.
Right. Absolutely.
Stop taking my talking points.
Gentlemen, there's enough time.
I was reading your mind.
There's enough troubleshooting for everyone.
Absolutely. There's some great Q&A questions actually on
There
around
are.
this topic. And I think actually we're getting some great Q&As, and they're, they're talking about, our DCA intervals, and they're talking
Mhm.
about our RRM and our sticky clients. Yeah, that all is in that, as it depends on the type of
Mhm.
devices and also the controller types you're using as well, right? APs. Right? So
Yeah, and folks, we're going to also get into some use cases and specifically talk about what the problems that were and how they diagnose them. And so bear with us as we get through that. But let's talk about Jason, non-Wi-Fi interference. How does that impact or cause potential problems for your network? And how do you identify what that is?
Yeah, and in some cases, very terribly. You can have as you see behind me here, to my left, I have, this is actually protocol compliant interference.
Mhm.
I've run into cases in healthcare or other verticals where I might have a lot of non-protocol compliant interference, and we're talking about just a small spike of it,
Mhm.
a very small, maybe kilobits, but a constant what's the word I'm searching for? FFT, right? And it
What is
disabled all
FFT,
wire.
sir?
Sorry, what was that?
What is FFT? Can you help us with
The
that?
acronym, define it for us, Jason.
Fast Warrior Transform. We're not going to get into it, but you made me lose my train of thought again. But
that's why we put you two together.
Yeah, basically what happens is all Wi-Fi communication was disabled because Wi-Fi is a graceful protocol. It's a listen before talk. So it does an energy detect. And with that constant source of energy, no Wi-Fi devices in an environment are able to communicate. So, non-protocol compliant sources of Wi-Fi interference, they could be anything from Bluetooth, which has, limited effect on Wi-Fi, to Wi-Fi cameras, which have a tremendous effect on Wi-Fi, or something as stupid as a stairwell light sensor, which data sheet says that it operates on high frequency RF, for you to only find out that high frequency RF is all of the 5.8 gigahertz band, and it blocks full Wi-Fi transmission there. So, again, it depends on the source of the interference.
Radar.
EFS.
Yeah. So speaking of, Nick, higher level protocols impacting the network. When something goes wrong, talk to us about what those are and how you diagnose that and how you fix the problem.
Yeah, so I call a server guy and tell him to fix his DHCP that has crashed my network, or to, stop screwing with the DNS server, stop changing A records. But yeah, I mean, that's actually a lot of it, right? Especially we're moving to more and more, Office 365, right? Teams online, Zoom. I mean, it's a lot of that. And so, it's a lot of talking, making sure the route switch guys are on board, because guess what? They're making changes that nobody knows about, VLANs and all that stuff, making sure that are the switch ports still configured properly, and all the way up of, okay, so, hey, Outlook isn't working. Well, okay, is Office 365 down right now, which we're, how many outages are we seeing recently of like, the Google Cloud or Office or those things. And I mean, that's definitely stuff that we can't anticipate, but it always gets blamed on Wi-Fi too. So, and I think that's, IT has always been very siloed, right? And it's still breaking down those silos and actually working with those folks. And that's a lot of the hard stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, your favorite, rogue containment.
My favorite.
Oh,
So
I can't wait for the answer for this.
this is one that I run into more than I care to admit. And I will be honest, I have a little bit of a cheat sheet for this. I know somebody asked for one. There's a specific vendor when I come into an environment that says, we all of a sudden just started having random disconnects. And I start asking a few questions, and usually they've either just recently moved into the space, or a neighbor has just recently moved in, and these things started happening. So I look for a particular vendor who does rogue containment really, really well. And 9 times out of 10, when I find that particular vendor and I capture some frames, lo and behold, I can see rogue containment coming from a spoofed SSID that the AP from the neighboring installation does with that particular vendor. Now, in other vendors, it's a little bit harder to identify. Of course, I've got to go and do a frame capture. If I see multiple DOFs coming from an infrastructure for any particular client, I can capture that, identify it, and then we can try and mitigate it. And mitigation can happen, multiple ways. It could be, if it's a friendly neighbor, it's simply as going in and maybe having a conversation between IT departments. Take your neighboring IT manager out to lunch. If it's something where it's at a corporate level, I've seen where it's gone all the way up to legal, where they've wanted to discuss it with the other company's legal, and they come to some amends at that point. But just know this: containment on any level, whether it's on your premises or off, don't do it.
Well done with the premises, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. It's interesting, Stu. One of my favorite stories that you tell is that you were troubleshooting for an executive in his office and found that his TV was broadcasting an SSID.
Yes.
And that was some of the challenges. I think oftentimes people don't realize printers are Wi-Fi enabled, televisions are Wi-Fi enabled, so many additional devices that can impact that, that is causing the problem.
Absolutely. And that is one of the biggest things and especially on televisions, they're going to not play nice. They're going to be in between channels, right? So they're going to be crossing between. In one case, it's on channel 8. Well, he's not going to play nice with my AP that's on 11 and the other one's on 6. And then, and to top it off, he's going to be broadcasting on a 40 megahertz wide channel. Right. And so he's really taken it to town. Right. And so that's when, and even warehouses, believe it or not, I mean, there are televisions in warehouses. You have them up there for HR, like they'll have, signage and whatnot on there, and they take them out of the box, put them up. Guess what? Automatic Wi-Fi direct, right? It's broadcasting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a common misconception about how deauthentication works. Like somebody goes into a controller and they say, oh, I see all of these SSIDs. I'm going to stop them from broadcasting or utilizing airtime. And really what it does is only stop them from associating via Wi-Fi direct or any type of client device associated to that device.
And now that we're not broadcasting, now we're adding additional airtime utilization, and we're taking up more of the airtime and making it harder on clients to actually do what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely. So Nick, talk to us about feature issues that cause problems.
They are
and how
fun.
do you fix it?
Yeah, they're fun. I had hair until some of these feature issues came out. I can actually say that, getting in good with a tech guy that you know well is always good.
Because the reality is you can't solve some of those
you
things.
can't.
You have
You
to
can't.
get.
I still
you have to get
have,
the vendor.
as far as I know to
recommendation.
this day, I still have 4 open bugs with one manufacturer that were open 2.5 years ago. So
Sounds familiar.
they just keep, keep going. But yeah, I mean, it's, how do you even find them to start with, right?
Yeah.
Hey, this AP, like APs are rebooting all of a sudden. Well, okay, did they lose power on this? Well, nobody's lost power, so there's lots of those things. And I know Jason has a ton of fun ones, but and just being on top of them, right? And it sucks because code is coming out so fast and quality on code is kind of sucking, but just keeping up with the release sheets, right? The release notes, what's, really looking at what's being fixed, because there's been a lot of that, and it's not only the manufacturers, Intel, everybody knows all the Intel fun. I mean, it's
the Intel bugs. Yeah.
and I have that conversation with clients all the time of, yeah, you're upgrading your network, but when was the last time you upgraded your network, the firmware on your laptops for the Intel cards and all of that. And it sucks that, I mean, the majority of it's Windows, right? And Windows has never tied in well with those and put those updates. And I know Windows 10's trying to, but I mean, that's another big thing, is working with those teams. And again, it's crossing those silos of making everybody talk together.
Yeah. So let's talk about some general things that we can do when you get that, right? So we talked about a lot of the causes, a lot of the things that can cause those symptoms, but let's talk specifically about what some of those, the steps to take to diagnose it, right? Jason, work with the users. How do you go about working and approaching that?
So from my perspective, we get called in when there is a definite problem. We're past the help desk stage. We're in like 3-alarm fire stage at this point. So we'll put somebody at the ground level to start data capture, and that could be anything from survey data to spectrum analysis to frame capture, right? To truly be able to analyze everything that's going on in that environment. We'll gather data from devices. We'll gather data from users. We'll see if we can correlate anything. If anything correlates to the infrastructure, if anything correlates to a particular client, or even maybe a particular area or device site. So, there's multiple ways to go about doing it.
Yeah, and I would say with the help desk thing, I've been working with customers recently where we're actually going through their whole help desk system and what's the life of a ticket, right? And a lot of it is, let's start using the tools you have. Either you have Prime or DNA Center from Cisco, or I've got Airwave, or, I've got Mist Dashboard, whatever, Marvis, everybody's favorite one now. But using those tools real time and that comes back to users have to open those tickets real time. And if they don't, I mean, you're kind of screwed a little bit, because it's all historical at that point. I can't see what's happening. But with those tools, I can actually go back a little bit and see that. So, I mean, I think that's a big thing, is training the people to use the tools that they're given.
Yeah. Talking about tools, I think that's one of the advantages that we have here at Ekahau. When you are troubleshooting, you can fire up your analyzer, you can fire up your survey app, connect your Sidekick, and go on site and capture some of that data. Analyzer gives you a real quick view of what is happening in your network. Some of the most common things. So you can look at the SSID, you can look at channel, you can look at that. And the red, the simple menu, green and red, will tell you if you've got a problem, right? Instead of follow the yellow brick road, follow the red, right? That's our...
That's right. It's red.
And I can have somebody remotely gather that data, and I can analyze it from home and not have to travel and incur the cost of trying to do that.
Exactly. So trying to simplify, that troubleshooting process. I think a lot of times we feel like we have to own it and do it all ourselves. Engage folks that are on the ground, to be able to help do some of those things. Because, the reality is we can't be everywhere and do everything all at once.
Yeah.
I think it's really...
Speak for yourself.
I'm not Nick. I'm sorry. I'm not as cool as Nick. I freely admit that.
Just imagine if there were multiples of me running around this earth.
Oh, please no.
I recently just worked with a customer doing just that, right? They had
Uh-huh.
purchased a Sidekick and a Connect license,
Mhm.
and they went around and they did the data collection for me, and I analyzed and walked them through step by step of the
Mhm.
troubleshooting process. So I mean that works
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? Is that now that, we've got great tools out there to help us. I mean,
Mhm.
not to put a shameless plug in for Survey on on iOS, but I mean, no, but seriously, I mean, it's when you have tools like that where you're able to actually say, hey, you know what? Can you go and do that survey today for me? I just can't get out there. The client is having some issues. I know what you'll be able to see and capture that what I need to see,
Mhm.
that's happening. And or even what we find is clients will have the tool sets and they'll say, you know what, they'll be working with folks like, Jason and Nick, and they'll say, well, can you guys, you're in the warehouse now, can you go and do a quick survey around there and then just share the project back with me, and I'll
Mhm.
tell you what I'm seeing. Yeah, and then that makes it easy, right? I mean, I find that is, as back in the old days when we used to do stuff, it was roll a truck, took a
Mhm.
long time to get there. Maybe you had to jump on a plane, maybe you had to do all that stuff, and it was just time consuming. Now we can speed up that process and diagnose and get that thing fixed, or at
Mhm.
least observe the problem and then provide a solution.
Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, going back even further, I mean, when I started, it was all, we took readings and I was walking around literally with a print in my hand drawing coverage
Mm-hmm.
patterns as I was walking through warehouses.
That was it. You
So,
had
I
your
mean, yeah,
your protractor out there, and you had compass, and you were doing stuff.
no
That was the
solo cups, dude. Did you not see my talk at
Solo cup.
WLP? Solo cups.
Oh,
Yes, yeah. I've
oh,
got the Tim
for
Hortons
that.
cup, the top and the bottom here. There
Yeah.
we go.
Very good. Well, let's talk about some of the things that you can try to help do to mitigate some of that risk. Nick, talk to us about some things that we can do to help troubleshooting and simplify that for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's my favorite one right there at the top. Validate, validate, validate. You should never, if a wireless network is being turned on, there has to be a validation, for
Mhm.
many, many reasons, right? If I don't have a validation assessment done, how do I even know if all my APs are on? How do I even know if I'm broadcasting? And,
Mhm.
and stuff that I'm using now and reports and things that we're getting out of Ekahau is things like transmit power. Those are broadcast from the APs. You can gather that information, and that,
Mhm.
I was working with a client and I was able to say, hey, we really do need to look at RRM because, your APs are broadcasting at 2 dB. And, so it's a little eye opening.
Mhm.
But if I don't have that validation, I don't even have anywhere to start. Right. And
Mhm.
I can't even say that, okay, yeah, it's good, but that's also where I'm capturing, the SNR values. I mean,
Mhm.
again, lots of conversations that we're having is, guys, it's quality, not quantity. Green on a survey isn't always what I want to see. I'm okay with yellow. I'm okay with a lot of yellow because guess what?
Mhm.
It's getting me where I need to be and doesn't meet the requirement. So
Well,
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, Nick, I mean, you must come across, I mean, that time where it's like you've planned it and the APs are in the right place because
Mhm.
part of your predictive design, and you've given it Ekahau all the
until the
information you
layer
need.
one guys screw up my install, but yeah.
Well, there you go, right? And then it's or it's that
That
controller
never
or cloud
happens.
settings, right?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
You don't know, right? But at least you know that, okay, I was confident enough to do this, but now
Mhm.
let's validate and validate. And that's what's really what I like about this is validate, 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 right?
Well,
Mhm.
and with the amount of data that is actually being broadcast by APs, I can
Mhm.
actually tell just packet captures or from a validation
Mm,
assessment, is my controller misconfigured?
Mhm.
Are my
absolutely.
APs, AP groups misconfigured? Anything. And that's vendor agnostic. I mean, that's not
Mhm.
vendor specific stuff. That's,
Yeah.
and, I can see, are all my APs on, because we can broadcast the names of the APs now. And so we see all of that. And I mean, that's
And
the super
and
important
and
stuff.
along with the transmit power, right? I mean, that is
Mhm.
bonus,
Well,
right?
Yeah,
and I
power is
can,
the big thing for
actually
that.
work as a client and see roaming happen. And I
Mhm.
can
Absolutely.
see, okay, yeah, okay, on the edge of cells, yeah, that's where I'm actually having issues with Zoom calls or whatever, because the that client's right on the edge. So I need to work on those, cell edges and kind of clean it up a little bit.
Mhm.
There was one question there in the chat, and I kind of grabbed it. It said, who would perform the validation, right? anybody can perform a validation. You know, you give them the
Mhm.
right tool sets to go ahead and
Absolutely.
Mhm.
capture the data. Anyone can do it, right?
Yeah.
This is not like
You can walk.
super professional, right? It's
Yep.
And I think that's the
there's
other
tools
thing.
out there to do it, right? And
I think
we've
that's
got
the
them.
other side too, Stu. Anybody can gather the data. It's like if I need to do a PCAP, you don't have to be an expert to do a PCAP. You just have to know where to go and what to do, and then enlist folks that do know how to help. If you can do it yourself, do it yourself. But if not, there are people, that's why we have, individuals that do that. And being able to go through that is a whole other thing. But you can do it without having the knowledge to gather the data to get what you need so that you can diagnose and troubleshoot it.
Absolutely, with a minimum amount of
Mhm.
walkthrough, gathering the data is the easy
Mhm.
part. It's deciphering the data and knowing what to do with it. That requires a little bit more
Hmm.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And
So let's
honest,
talk.
yep.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
No, I was going to say, I mean, most of that too is just experience,
Hmm.
really understanding what you're trying to find. And,
Mhm.
that's, or sending your packet, sending your captures to Peter so he can tell you what's wrong with your network.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Peter. Everything's coming your way. But that's one of the things I think too is if you want to get better at that, like the packet analysis and being able to identify and looking at the frames and what's going on, you don't have to wait for a problem to do that. Fire up, grab a PCAP, fire up Wireshark, drop it in and look at, and you can see the frames, you can see the authorizations, you can see the beacon frames, you can see what's broadcasting, you can see what's happening to be able to better identify what's going on, just to start learning about it. And I think that's something too. Like right now for me, I'm studying for my CWAP. That's one of the things that I'm doing, is just to look and to make sure that I understand kind of what's happening in my network so that I have a better understanding.
Um,
Repetition is key, and I will
Mhm.
say, the more that you look at it,
Mhm.
like the first time that I ever looked at a wireless PCAP years ago, I was like, what the hell is this? And now, after 10, 15 years of looking at them, I mean, I'm, of course, still not an expert, but I know when, let's say, the issue that I described that I had a couple of weeks ago, what I saw
Mhm.
in the PCAP file, I knew something wasn't adding up, right? I wasn't seeing a four-way handshake. I wasn't seeing any of that information. So, and I saw that from a subset of clients, but I didn't see it from a subset of others. So that's how I was able to help identify
Mhm.
the bug. Sometimes it's knowing when to say when and saying, you know what, this doesn't make sense what I'm seeing. I don't see what the
Mhm.
standard identifies. I'm going to make a phone call and attack because this is probably related to a bug.
I think that's what's really cool too, is that you can actually see like the four-way handshake occurring when you look at that at the packet, on the packet level. It's really kind of cool to see theory in practice.
And if you have a color code applied to it, there's a couple of cool color codes out there. Joel
Mhm.
Crane has a good one that he came up with.
Mhm.
It's for the MetaGeek coloring. It basically colors frames, control frames, management frames, and data in different colors that help you easily identify those different frame types.
Yeah, that's important. So Nick, talk to us a little more about some additional things that we can do to help mitigate and troubleshoot.
Mitigate, just, plug every connection into a wired connection, and then you don't have to
Mhm.
worry about it. But
That's a whole other, that brings up a
That
whole
is a
other ball
whole
wax,
other
right?
thing.
Okay, are you on the right VLAN? Do I have PoE enabled now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you limiting me to 10 megabits instead of
Right.
a gig?
well, I mean, and a lot of it, a lot of it's just understanding the client, right? Because
Mhm.
as we all know, it really depends on the client. I have that conversation all the time with customers of, it's, hey, roaming, we can do all we can on the Wi-Fi, but it's up to the client ultimately. So, just understanding, are we doing 5 gig? Are we doing voice and video? So,
Mhm.
a lot of that, but like your tips on here, it also comes back to, in my mind, it's a lot of the support system you have in the back end, because
Mhm.
you get repetitious, did I make that word up? I hope so. Repetitive tickets coming in. And when I get repetitive tickets, do we have a knowledge base that, hey, guess what? I don't have to get called in the middle of the night because there's a P1 going on, when all it is actually, you turn off the Wi-Fi, turn it back on, or whatever it is, but creating those, and you don't have to have like a service now, those are awesome because with the tools coming out now, right, tickets can be auto created, DNA can tie into it. There's some stuff with Aruba and Mist that we can tie directly in and auto open tickets when an issue happens. But I've worked in warehouses for 20 years. Managers the first thing we ask, where are your spreadsheets at? Because they always have a spreadsheet of all of the issues. Anything like that can help, and it does start helping to, then you can say, okay, I'm moving to this location, and a lot of customers, we've got multiple locations that we're creating stuff for. Well, that's great, and they try to cookie cutter it. And the first thing I always tell them is, yeah, we can create a base config, but remember, this is a living, breathing thing. Wireless is living and breathing, and so we have to adjust it per site we're going to. And I mean, that right there can help mitigate a lot of issues of just understanding that, hey, just because they're all built the same, they're not the same. I've got different interference coming around me. I've got different neighbors that are causing issues. I got Bob next door running, 160 megahertz wide channels or whatever, and just, blowing me away. And so it is just understanding all of that.
So we're going to talk about some use cases here, folks. But before we get into that, we have a poll for you. So of the options that are listed below, what are the issues you see while troubleshooting a network? Channel interference, incorrect number of APs or AP location, wireless being blamed, or non-Wi-Fi interference? Stu, cue my Jeopardy music.
It should be cued. There we go.
There we go.
I'm still not able to answer, Tawny. I really need that fixed.
Panelists are not allowed to answer.
I really wanted that gift card.
I feel
there's no gift card.
Wait, the gift card, what?
I think I know what the most answered question is going to be for.
All right. Well, I'm glad you asked that, Jason. Let's find out.
Well, that was a quick poll. That was good.
Yeah. So it's kind of like right in the middle.
Actually, closer than I thought.
We did miss an option there that Mr. Rodriguez pointed out. Blame me for everything. That usually works for everybody.
That would have been 100%.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. So let's talk about some specific use cases. Jason, I know you were talking about it, something that you were working on a couple weeks ago in the recent times. So talk to us about what the problem was, how it came about, and what you did to fix it.
Sure. Yeah. So that was the Android device compatibility issue that I had. So we were engaged to come out to a customer. Customer was complaining about device connectivity with all Android devices on a .1x authenticated network. However, they had the slightly different vintage of scanner gun there that ran on Windows CE that had no issues authentication. So one of the things we did, and I did this remote, we put an engineer on site who was able to gather some preliminary data, some frame captures for me. I analyzed those frame captures and looked at the initial for the Windows device. So
what were you looking for in the frame capture?
Well, really just an anomaly, right? Anything that doesn't show me communication, like all the way through authentication association, the four-way handshake, that. So I could see the Windows devices, they were working fine. So that told me that there were no issues with the backend, right? .1x authentication was working. Everything up to the controller was working. So I started looking at the Android devices, and we had multiples. On every one of those devices that we ran captures on, we got up into the authentication part, and then we just died, right? There was no four-way handshake after that. So right then and there, something didn't make sense. Something didn't smell right to me. So in turn, I got TAC involved. And at that point, there was a bug that was identified that had to do with, funny enough, you mentioned this early, Stu, but Wi-Fi Direct and disabling Wi-Fi Direct and how it caused some instability in certain clients. Lo and behold, the moment that we clicked that box on the controller, all of the clients connected. So that was how I was able to solve that issue. Another issue, this is a layer 1 issue, and this
Mhm.
one I personally did. This was a few years ago, but I always like to re-reference it. This was the one that the 5.8 gigahertz stairwell ignited, and this killed all communication basically within a healthcare environment on mobile handsets that would only support Uni 1 and Uni 3 bands. So you're talking 8 channels there, 4 of which are now taken out. So you can imagine how that affected that environment and their VoIP environment, not well. You know, bringing the Sidekick in, I was able to identify the narrowest of spectrum interference, and it was completely random. So I sat and I waited, and you know, after an hour or so, I got enough spectrum data recorded that I was able to take and show the customer. You know, it actually took a long time to find the source because it was everywhere. It was so prominent, it was everywhere. The only way I actually found it was traversing floors between the stairwells, and I noticed the spike when I jumped in the stairwell, that
Mhm.
it jumped like 20 dB. And we started looking in the stairwells, and we found out that that healthcare provider had just installed those within the past 3 to 4 weeks.
Hmm.
So those are 2 good examples of how I've used Ekahau with layer 1, layer 2 troubleshooting.
And you know, I think oftentimes that's one of the things that really does impact what's happening on the network, because you do your predictive design, you validate everything's working perfect, and then they come in and change something. They add something. They bring a new wireless camera. I was working with a customer way back when on a retail store, and one of the challenges that they had was like 4 stores in particular were complaining, but they were all in the same city. Turns
Mhm.
out they were running this promotion, and they basically put a Faraday cage of signage around the all the APs. And so, you know, it's stuff changes, stuff
They don't
happens,
work
right?
well when you put Faraday cages around them.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. So Nick, share with us some experiences that you had, what the problem was, how you identified what it was, and excuse me, how you diagnosed it, or excuse me, how you fixed it.
Yeah. So, um, got a good couple. So, warehouse for a large online retailer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going through, it's getting close. You know, obviously busy season, all of that. They're ramping up from a couple hundred users to a couple of thousand. Um, all of a sudden, we're surveying and like, yeah, every day about 12:30, just the whole network just kind of shuts down, and it's like, okay, so we're surveying, looking around. This is way back when, looking at spectrum analysis, and all of a sudden, about 12:30, 100% duty cycle on the network, just black all the way up the spectrum. So, okay, that's fun. So we start walking around, kind of figuring out what it is. Well, about 12 or 12:30 every day, 35 microwaves fire up in the break room and shut down the whole network. So, so we gave them
Aging
a couple of
microwaves.
options. Buy new microwaves. Here's some lead paint you could put around them to keep the the RF in, or let's move everything to 5 gigahertz. And so, it's those kinds of things, because
Mm-hmm.
5 at that point, 5 was still fairly new. It was open, and so we went that route.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were talking about the cameras, we were kind of same retailer. We were looking at where they had some e-reader labs where they were fixing them or whatever, and this spike kept happening on the spectrum, and they kept having issues in this lab. So back in the day, it was Cognio, the old Cognio stuff. We're walking around trying to figure out what is going on. And so every time we walked past an exit sign, it would spike and go completely crazy on the spectrum. So, we're like, what's with this sign? Everybody's like, we have no idea. That's always been there. Well, come to find out, security had put a tiny wireless camera in the exit sign and refused to tell anybody it was there. And so they were shutting down their network because they threw this camera in there. So same kind of what you're talking about. And then I've got one of our customers, higher ed, gaming systems. Everybody's got PS4s, Xboxes, whatever. We got dorm rooms, all of that, and
Mm-hmm.
we're just having lots of issues. So we've did some surveys. Not surveys, assessments. I knew I was going to slip. We
Good boy.
did some assessments. Analyzed it, and it's like all those devices are still 2.4, right? Because
Mhm.
gaming people don't like 5 because it's too expensive to put a 5 gigahertz chip instead of a 2.4 in. So, we're surveying, and we end up turning off 2.4 radios on almost half of those APs in the dorms to support that, just because there was so much. It was literally, we were in one dorm, and we're seeing, 3 dorms over, we can see the RF bleeding through. So it's just, again, analyzing, using, we were analyzing the survey and, doing predictive and, real time, and say, okay, if I turn these off, what does it look like? And then we validated, okay, yeah, we didn't break anything. It looks better and all of that. So do lots of those, especially now with, high density and everything. I mean, it's super important,
Yeah.
turning off 40 megahertz and going to 20 megahertz and understanding why and understanding how that changes the environment, because especially with the high density voice and video, we have to do that stuff.
Yeah. Well, folks, we are getting close to the hour. Stu, I know you had some comments. I'll go ahead and then we'll wrap up after that.
No, sorry, I just saying on the Xbox side of it is definitely they've switched to now 5 gigahertz, so make it even more complicated.
And
So now their controllers now talk 5 gigahertz to the Xbox
and the
Really?
PS5
and the PS5. Yes.
and so that's the other thing, like with higher ed, a lot of the students are in their dorms as professional gamers on their off time. And so, yeah, it's, hey,
And their Twitch streams.
my kid can't do his homework. Well, no, your kid can't play Xbox. That's the real issue. But the kid's not going to tell the parents that that's why they're failing class.
That's right.
All right. So Jason, any last thoughts on troubleshooting in general?
Follow the steps. There's a couple of good processes that are laid out by vendors. There is the CWAP process. Follow the steps and walk through that. And those, by capturing that data with each one of those steps, that's going to help you be successful in your troubleshooting journey. I would also say, there's not anyone who knows everything. So, don't be surprised if you run across something and you'd be like, this is the first time I've ever seen this. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and I still come across stuff that it's the first time I've seen regularly. So, don't be afraid to reach out into the community and say, hey, has anybody else seen this? Because I've never seen this before. This is kind of an anomaly. What do you guys see?
Yep.
Yeah. Nick, what about you?
I mean, everything Jason said, the other big thing to look at, and I wish we would have had more time to do it, is look into the spectrum and understand, what we're looking at for spectrum and things like that, because that's where you're going to see a lot of what you need.
You know what?
I'm so glad you said that, Stu.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you so much. That's one of my favorite topics. Right?
Love segues.
Yes.
Not the kind, not the kind that Keith ride.
No, yeah.
All I'm saying is we next webinar may or may not be talking about troubleshooting part 2.
Yes.
Of this.
Yeah. Yes. You know what? And I'm so glad, Jason, that you have it. Folks, if you're looking at Jason's
I've been
background.
segueing the whole
I know.
I know. And
thank you.
You know what's really important there? And I know we're up at the top of the hour, but it's when we were talking about finding that interference. One cool thing about that RTFM viewer there in the back is we're seeing that at 1 second interval. That is super fast, right?
smoking.
And it's so smoking that the sidekick,
You look hot, Jason.
it picks up that such minute things that are going on, right? That regular APs just don't see it, and you'd be surprised what we pick up on that thing. And those blips are important, right? And because Wi-Fi changes every day, if not by the hour or by the second.
It is a living, breathing organism.
Yes.
It is.
To your point, to the spectrum and another brand spectrum analyzer wouldn't have identified that 5.8 source that I spoke about because
that's exactly
it was so narrow and it was so quick. And that's where the sidekick really comes in, because of the resolution and the speed of it. There's not, unless you have a full-blown spec A, this is it.
Yeah, nobody wants to carry around the Roden Schwartz tank that weighs like 250 pounds, right?
Right.
And
I got this nice little guy right here.
And you can warm your lunch And you can warm your lunch on it.
Yes, that's right.
That's
Keeps
great.
my
All right,
Coffee
folks.
coffee
Well,
warm.
we really are at the top of the hour. I know. Thank you, Nick and Jason, for joining us. We are
Thank you.
telling them that if you guys have questions, we did get a lot of really great questions that we didn't quite get to. We're sorry about that, folks. But please feel free to reach out directly to Nick and Jason. They'll be more than happy to provide some of the information. I know there were a lot of questions about some of the stuff Jason, both you and Nick were talking about, and cheat sheets and different type of things. So please, folks, feel free to reach out to both of them. They're more than willing and very active on Twitter. And with that, I'm Tawny.
And I'm your sidekick, Stu.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks,
Thank you,
folks.
everybody.